The boardroom went silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence, the suffocating kind. The kind that makes your ears ring and your chest tighten. Ethan Hale sat frozen in his leather chair, his fingers gripping the edge of the mahogany table. His eyes, sharp, calculating eyes that had closed billion-dollar deals without blinking, were locked on two small faces across the room. A boy and a girl. Maybe 6 or 7 years old. The boy had his jawline. Strong. Defined. Unmistakable. The girl had his eyes. Deep-set. Piercing. The same shade of gray-blue that stared back at him every morning in the mirror. His heart hammered against his ribs. No. It can't be. But it was. Have you ever walked into a room and realized your past was staring back at you? Not metaphorically. Not in some poetic, distant way. But literally. Right there. In flesh and blood. In two children who shouldn't exist. Ethan Hale was a billionaire. A man who controlled empires, moved markets, and avoided scandals like they were the plague. He didn't make mistakes. And when he did, he buried them so deep no one would ever find them. But here they were. 2 mistakes he never knew he made. Standing beside a woman he thought he'd left behind 7 years ago. Nia Brooks. She stood at the front of the room, calm and composed, holding a tablet like she belonged there. Like she hadn't just walked into his carefully controlled world and detonated a bomb he didn't even know was ticking. She didn't look at him. Not once. But he couldn't look away. The other board members shuffled papers, oblivious. To them, this was just another consultant presentation. Another face. Another voice. But to Ethan, this was the beginning of the end. Because what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the woman he dismissed 7 years ago, the woman he told to handle it when she came to him pregnant and terrified, wasn't just some corporate consultant scraping by. She was hiding a truth that would shatter everything he thought he controlled. A truth about power. About bloodlines. About billions he didn't even know existed. And those 2 children? They weren't just his secret. They were hers too. Drop a comment if you've ever had a secret catch up with you when you least expected it. Because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, power, and the price of pride. Let me tell you something about Ethan Hale. He wasn't the kind of billionaire you saw on magazine covers. He didn't throw parties. He didn't date supermodels. He didn't flaunt his wealth like some trophy he needed the world to see. No. Ethan Hale was the kind of rich that whispered instead of shouted. The kind that moved in shadows and made power look effortless. He built his empire quietly, carefully, and without a single scandal touching his name. Until today. This is a story about pride, power, and the cost of thinking you're untouchable. It's about a man who thought he could control everything, his business, his image, his future, only to discover that some things refused to stay buried. And it's about a woman who survived the worst betrayal of her life and came back stronger than anyone ever expected. If you're here for drama, betrayal, and a twist that'll leave you speechless, you're in the right place. Hit that like button if you're ready for this roller coaster. Trust me, you'll want to buckle up. Now, let me take you back. 7 years ago, Nia Brooks was nobody special. At least, that's what Ethan thought. She wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy. She was just a smart, beautiful black woman working in corporate communications, trying to build a life for herself one paycheck at a time. She met Ethan at a charity gala. He was there writing checks. She was there because her firm was consulting on the event. They talked. They laughed. They connected in a way that felt rare and real. And for a year, they were happy. Or at least, Nia thought they were. Their relationship was private. No photos. No public appearances. No one even knew they were together. Ethan said it was to protect what they had. To keep the media vultures away. To preserve something pure in a world that devoured everything. Nia believed him. She believed him because she loved him. And when you love someone, you make excuses for the red flags you're too afraid to see. But then came the night that changed everything. The night Nia sat across from Ethan in his pristine penthouse apartment, her hands trembling, her voice barely a whisper, and told him she was pregnant. She expected surprise. Maybe even fear. What she got was worse. Calm. Cold, calculated calm. Ethan didn't yell. He didn't panic. He just sat there, rubbed his face, and said the words that would haunt her for years. I can't have this child. Not, we'll figure it out. Not, I'm scared, but we'll get through this. Just, I can't. He explained it like a business transaction. Inheritance complications. Media scrutiny. Deals on the line that couldn't afford distractions. Then he offered to pay for a clinic. Offered to take care of her. Like she was a problem to be solved. A loose end to be tied up. Nia said no. Simple. Final. And Ethan didn't argue. He just disappeared. Pulled away like smoke. Like she'd never mattered at all. So Nia did what she had to do. She left. She raised that baby alone. Worked 3 jobs. Skipped meals. Survived on willpower and the fierce, unbreakable love only a mother knows. But here's the thing Ethan never knew. Here's the twist that makes this story unforgettable. Nia wasn't carrying one baby. She was carrying 2. Twins. A boy and a girl. And she raised them both without ever asking Ethan for a single dollar. Without ever speaking his name. Without ever telling them who their father was. She survived. She built a life. And she did it all on her own. Or so she thought. Because what Nia didn't know, what no one knew, was that her late father, a man she barely remembered, had left her something. Something massive. Something world-changing. And when that truth finally came to light, it didn't just change Nia's life. It destroyed Ethan's. So here we are. 7 years later. In a boardroom where the past and present collide. Where a billionaire comes face to face with the children he never wanted. And the woman he underestimated. What happens next? Let's find out. Nia Brooks was 28 when she met Ethan Hale. She wasn't looking for love. She wasn't even looking for attention. She was focused. Driven. Building a career in corporate communications, one carefully crafted press release at a time. She was the kind of woman who showed up early, stayed late, and made sure every detail was perfect. Not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because she knew that in a world that constantly underestimated Black women, perfect wasn't good enough. You had to be exceptional. And Nia was. She was smart, emotionally intelligent. The kind of person who could read a room in seconds and know exactly what to say to make things happen. But more than that, she was kind. She believed in people. Believed in honesty. Believed that if you worked hard and treated people with respect, the universe would eventually meet you halfway. She wasn't chasing wealth. She'd grown up without it and learned to live just fine. What she wanted was something money couldn't buy. Respect. Partnership. Real love. The kind of love where someone saw all of you, the messy parts, the scared parts, the beautiful parts, and stayed anyway. That's what she thought she found in Ethan Hale. Ethan was different from anyone she'd ever met. At 35, he'd already built an empire. Real estate. Tech investments. Venture capital. His name didn't trend on social media, but in the right circles, it carried weight. He was the kind of billionaire who moved in silence. No flashy cars. No tabloid scandals. No public meltdowns. Just quiet, calculated power. He was tall, sharp-featured, with the kind of presence that made people straighten their spines when he entered a room. But when he looked at you, really looked at you, it felt like you were the only person in the world. That's how he made Nia feel. At least, at first. They met at a charity gala in Manhattan. Nia's firm was handling communications for the event. Ethan was writing checks that could fund small countries. She wasn't supposed to talk to him. She was there to work. But he approached her during the cocktail hour, drink in hand, eyes curious. "You don't look like you want to be here," he said. Nia smiled. "I could say the same about you." And, just like that, they were talking. Not networking. Not small talk. Really talking. About books. About ambition. About the strange loneliness that comes with success. By the end of the night, he asked for her number. She gave it to him. And for the next year, they built something. Or at least, Nia thought they did. Their relationship was private. Intensely private. No photos. No public dates. No one at her firm knew. No one in his circle knew. Ethan said it was to protect what they had. to keep the media away, to preserve something real in a world obsessed with image. Nia believed him. She believed him because when they were alone, he was different. Softer. Vulnerable in ways she suspected he never was with anyone else. He told her about his childhood. About a father who measured love in profit margins. About learning early that showing weakness was the fastest way to lose. And Nia listened. She held space for him. She let herself fall. What she didn't see, what she couldn't see, were the red flags. The way he never introduced her to his friends. The way he always picked restaurants in distant neighborhoods where no one would recognize him. The way he tensed whenever she mentioned the future. She told herself it was just his personality. That he was private. Careful. But the truth was simpler. Ethan wanted control. He wanted a companion who fit neatly into his life without disrupting it. Someone who made him feel good but didn't demand too much. Someone he could keep in a separate box, away from the empire he'd spent his life building. Nia wanted partnership. Honesty. A love built on mutual respect, not transactions. Ethan wanted discretion. Convenience. Plausible deniability. They were never going to work. But Nia didn't know that yet. She thought she'd found someone worth believing in. Someone worth building a future with. For a year, it worked. They fell into a rhythm. Quiet dinners at his place. Long conversations that stretched into early morning. Moments that felt sacred and small and impossibly beautiful. Until the night Nia's world and his changed forever. Nia suspected she was pregnant for 2 weeks before she took the test. Her body felt different. Off. Like something fundamental had shifted and she couldn't name what it was. She bought 3 tests. Took them all in the same sitting. Watched as each one came back with the same result. Positive. She sat on the bathroom floor, back against the cold tile, hands shaking. Fear crashed over her first. Then hope. Then a strange, tentative joy she was afraid to feel too deeply. She was going to be a mother. And Ethan, complicated, guarded Ethan, was going to be a father. She rehearsed the conversation for days. Imagined his face. Imagined surprise, maybe fear, but eventually support. Because that's what people did when they loved each other, right? They figured it out. She told herself it would be okay. She had to believe that. So one quiet evening, in Ethan's penthouse apartment with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, she told him. They were sitting on the couch. He had a glass of wine. She had water. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely steady. "I need to tell you something." He looked at her, calm and attentive. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. For a moment, nothing happened. Ethan didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stared at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. Then his face changed. Not into joy. Not into surprise. It closed. Like shutters slamming over windows. "Are you sure?" His voice was even. Too even. "Yes." He set his wine glass down carefully. Rubbed his face with both hands. Exhaled slowly. "I can't have this child." The words landed like a slap. Nia felt something inside her crack. "What?" she whispered. "I can't," he repeated. Calm. Detached. Like he was declining a business proposal. "This complicates things, Nia. Inheritance structures. Media attention. I have deals in motion that can't afford distractions." "Distractions?" Her voice shook. "This is a baby, Ethan. Our baby." He didn't flinch. "I understand this is emotional for you. But we have to be practical." Practical. The word felt like poison. "There's a clinic I know," he continued. Very discreet. "I'll cover all the costs. Afterward, I'll make sure you're taken care of. Financially. Whatever you need." Nia stared at him. This man she thought she knew. This man she'd loved. This man she'd built a future with in her mind. He was offering to pay her to erase their child. Not their child. A complication. An inconvenience. A problem to be solved. She felt the clarity settle over her like cold water. She finally saw where she stood. Not as a partner. Not as someone he loved. As a risk to be managed. "No," she said quietly. Ethan looked up. "Nia." "No," she repeated. Stronger this time. "I'm keeping this baby. With or without you." He studied her face, and for just a second, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or fear. But he didn't fight her. He didn't argue. He didn't beg her to stay. He just nodded slowly, like he'd already made his decision. "I understand," he said. "But I can't be part of this." And just like that, it was over. Nia left that night and never went back. She deleted his number, blocked his email, cut every thread that tied her to him. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just focused on surviving. On building a life for the child growing inside her. On moving forward, even when everything in her wanted to collapse. What Nia didn't know, what she couldn't have known in that moment, was that Ethan had been wrong about one thing. She wasn't carrying just one life. She was carrying two. Twins. A boy and a girl. Two futures he'd never see coming. Two secrets that would one day walk into a boardroom and shatter the empire he thought was untouchable. But that day was still 7 years away. First, Nia had to survive. The pregnancy was brutal from the beginning. Morning sickness hit Nia like a freight train and never let up. Not in the second trimester. Not ever. She threw up before work. During work. After work. She lived on crackers and ginger ale and sheer willpower. The hospital visits started early. Dehydration. Severe fatigue. Blood pressure issues. Every time a doctor asked if she had support at home, Nia lied and said yes. Because the truth that she was completely alone felt too heavy to say out loud. She worked through it all. Answered emails between waves of nausea. Took client calls from hospital beds. Saved every single dollar she could because she knew what was coming. Diapers. Formula. Daycare. A future she'd have to build alone. She told no one about Ethan. Not her friends. Not her coworkers. Not even the nurse who kept asking about the father. No lawsuit. No demands. No angry texts or public callouts. Just silence and survival. Because Nia had learned something important a long time ago, you can't force someone to care. And she wasn't about to beg. The delivery came 2 weeks early. Nia's water broke at 3 in the morning. She called a cab, grabbed the hospital bag she'd packed months ago, and went alone. Labor was long. Agonizing. 14 hours of pain that felt like her body was being torn apart from the inside. But finally, after what felt like forever, she heard it. A cry. Sharp and furious and beautiful. "It's a boy," the doctor said, placing the tiny, wriggling baby on her chest. Nia sobbed. Relief and joy and exhaustion crashing over her all at once. She held him, this perfect little human she'd made, and thought, "We did it. We're okay, *." Then the doctor's voice cut through the haze. "Wait. There's a second baby." Nia's heart stopped. "What?" "You're having twins," the doctor said, already moving. "I need you to push again." Twins. Twins. Panic flooded her system. She wasn't prepared for two. She didn't have enough money. Enough space. Enough anything for two. But her body didn't care. 10 minutes later, a second cry filled the room. A girl. Smaller than her brother, but just as fierce. The nurse placed her beside the boy, and Nia looked down at both of them, overwhelmed and terrified and impossibly in love. Two lives. Two futures. Two children who would never know their father didn't want them. She named them carefully. Caleb, the boy. Strong even as a newborn. Calm. Watchful. Like he already understood he had to protect his sister. Zara, the girl. Bright-eyed and curious. Loud. Fierce. Like she was daring the world to try and break her. The years that followed were the hardest of Nia's life. She worked multiple jobs. Freelance consulting during the day. Content writing at night. Anything that let her stay home with the twins and still pay rent. There was no nanny. No family nearby. No support system. Just Nia and two babies who needed everything. She taught them resilience without meaning to. They learned to entertain themselves while she worked. Learned to share. Learned that love didn't require money. She taught them kindness. Integrity. That your word mattered more than your bank account. And she never told them about their father. Never spoke Ethan's name. Never explained why there were no pictures of him. No birthday cards. No child support checks. She just kept moving forward. But it was hard. Rent kept increasing. Daycare costs swallowed her paycheck. Medical bills piled up every time one of the twins got sick. And the exhaustion, the bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion of being both parents, never went away. Some nights, after the twins were asleep, Nia would sit on the floor of their tiny apartment and cry. Not because she regretted them, but because she was so tired of doing it alone. What Nia didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that she'd never been as alone as she thought. Her father, Donovan Brooks, had died when she was 6 years old. She barely remembered him. A tall man with kind eyes who traveled too much and was gone before she really knew him. What she didn't know was that Donovan Brooks had been a reclusive tech billionaire. A genius who'd built an empire in data security and died with a fortune worth billions. And she was his only child. His estate had been tangled in legal battles for years. Corporate disputes. Inheritance challenges. Lawyers fighting over every asset. Nia had been named in the will. But after her mother died and Nia moved multiple times, different cities, different jobs, different lives, the lawyers lost track of her. The inheritance sat waiting. Unclaimed. Unknown. And then, 7 years later, fate gave Nia and Ethan an appointment they couldn't cancel. The job offer came through email on a Tuesday morning. Halebrooks Equity Foundation was looking for a communications consultant. 6-month contract. Great pay. Meaningful work funding education for underserved communities. Nia almost didn't apply. The name Hale made her stomach twist. But it was a common name. And she needed the work. The twins were starting 2nd grade. School supplies. New clothes. Field trip fees. So she applied. And she got it. She didn't know Ethan was on the board. She didn't know she'd ever see him again. The first board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Nia had her presentation ready. Her notes organized. Her confidence carefully constructed. Then her babysitter called. "I'm so sorry, Nia. I have the flu. I can't watch the kids today." Nia's heart sank. She called everyone. Friends. Neighbors. The backup sitter. No one was available. She stared at the clock. The meeting started in an hour. She had no choice. "Caleb. Zara. Get your shoes on. You're coming with me." Caleb looked up from his book, concern already in his eyes. "Are you sure, Mom?" "It'll be fine," Nia lied. "Just sit quietly. Bring something to read." 20 minutes later, they walked into the foundation's building. Marble floors. Glass walls. The kind of wealth that whispered instead of shouted. Caleb held his book like a shield. Zara gripped Nia's hand, eyes wide and taking in everything. "Stay close," Nia whispered. "And stay quiet." They took the elevator to the 15th floor. The boardroom door was already open. Nia walked in, twins in tow, head high despite the panic thrumming through her veins. She scanned the table quickly. 8 people. Expensive suits. Polite smiles. And then her eyes landed on him. Ethan Hale. Sitting at the head of the table. Their eyes met. For one terrible, frozen second, the world stopped. Ethan's face drained of color. His hand, halfway to his coffee cup, went completely still. He stared at the children. At Caleb, standing tall with his sharp jawline and serious eyes. At Zara, bright and fierce with her deep-set gaze. His jawline. His eyes. Nia watched the realization crash over him like a wave. Watched his carefully controlled expression crack. Watched him understand, in one terrible instant, what he'd walked away from. The other board members noticed nothing. To them, this was just a consultant who'd brought her kids to work. Unfortunate, maybe, but not scandalous. But Ethan couldn't look away. His mind was racing. Are they mine? How many are there? Why didn't she tell me? What does she want? Questions spiraled, but he couldn't ask any of them. Not here. Not now. Nia didn't flinch. She didn't explain. She didn't even acknowledge that she knew him. She simply smiled politely at the room, introduced herself with perfect professionalism, and sat down. "Thank you all for having me today," she said, her voice steady and clear. I'm excited to share some strategies for expanding the foundation's reach. She opened her laptop. Caleb sat beside her, silent and watchful. Zara swung her legs, humming quietly under her breath. And Ethan sat frozen, his entire world collapsing inside his chest while everyone around him took notes and nodded along. Nia's presentation was flawless. Data-driven. Compelling. Exactly what they needed. But Ethan didn't hear a word. He just kept staring at the children. At the boy who had his nose. At the girl who had his grandmother's smile. At the 2 lives he'd told Nia to erase. And for the first time in 7 years, Ethan Hale, billionaire, empire builder, man who controlled everything, felt completely, utterly powerless. When the meeting ended, Nia packed up quickly. "Come on, guys," she said softly to the twins. She walked toward the door without looking back. But Ethan's voice stopped her. "Ms. Brooks." She turned slowly, met his eyes, and said nothing. Comment below. Would you have said something in that moment, or stayed silent like Nia? Nia made it to the elevator before Ethan caught up. "Wait." His voice cut through the quiet hallway. Nia stopped, but didn't turn around. The twins looked up at her, confused. She squeezed their hands gently. "Go wait by that bench," she said softly, pointing down the hall. "I'll be right there." Caleb hesitated, protective instincts already flaring. But Zara tugged his sleeve, and they walked away together. Only then did Nia turn to face Ethan. "We need to talk," he said. His voice was low. Urgent. Like he had any right to urgency after 7 years of silence. Nia's expression didn't change. Cold. Controlled. "We have nothing to talk about. You made that clear 7 years ago." "Nia. Don't." Her voice was sharp enough to cut. "Don't say my name like we're friends. Like you didn't look at me when I was pregnant and terrified and tell me to handle it." Ethan flinched. "Good. Are they mine?" he asked quietly. Nia said nothing, but her silence was louder than any answer. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, the careful composure he wore like armor finally cracking. "I'll take responsibility," he said quickly. "I'll set up trusts. Pay for their education. Medical expenses. Whatever they need. I'll..." "Stop." Nia's voice was ice. "They don't need your money, Ethan. I'm trying to help. They need a father." Her words landed like stones. "And you chose not to be one. You don't get to buy your way out of that now." Ethan opened his mouth. Closed it. For once in his life, he had no response. Nia turned and walked away. She collected the twins, held their hands, and left the building without looking back. Ethan stood alone in the hallway, watching her go. And for the first time, he understood what he'd lost. 2 days later, Nia was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a suit holding a large envelope. She opened the door cautiously. "Nia Brooks." "Yes. I have a registered letter for you. Sign here, please." Nia signed, took the envelope, and closed the door. The return address read, Whitmore and Associates. Estate Settlement Division, ****. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The letter inside was formal, dense with legal language. But 3 sentences jumped out at her like they were written in fire. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been located as the sole living heir to the estate of Donovan Brooks. The estate has been valued at approximately $4.20 billion. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to begin the transfer process." Nia read it once, twice, 3 times. The paper slipped from her fingers and floated to the floor. $4.2 billion. Her father, Donovan Brooks. The man she barely remembered. The man who died when she was 6. The man she thought had left her with nothing. He'd left her everything. Tears blurred her vision. The letter explained it all. Tech patents her father had developed. Real estate across 3 continents. Investment portfolios. A controlling share in 3 Fortune 500 companies. He'd built an empire. And she was his only child. The estate had been tied up in legal battles for years. Corporate rivals challenging the will. Lawyers fighting over every asset. But Nia had been named. Always. The problem was that after her mother died, Nia had moved. Changed cities. Changed jobs. Changed addresses so many times the lawyers couldn't find her. Until now. Nia sat on the floor of her small apartment, surrounded by toys and laundry and the beautiful chaos of the life she'd built. And she realized something that made her chest ache. She'd survived the hardest years of her life thinking she was alone. But her father had been protecting her all along. Not with his presence, but with his legacy. Nia wasn't the struggling single mother anymore. She was one of the wealthiest women in the country. And she'd done it without Ethan. Without his money. Without his help. Without needing him at all. She picked up her phone and called the law firm. "This is Nia Brooks," she said, her voice steady. "I'm ready to claim my inheritance." And when Ethan found out who Nia really was, his world didn't just shift. It shattered. The invitation arrived 3 weeks later. The Global Philanthropy Summit. A high-profile event attended by world leaders, CEOs, tech moguls, and media from every major outlet. Nia had been invited to speak. Not as a consultant. Not as someone's assistant. As Nia Brooks. Billionaire heiress. Philanthropist. ***. She stood in front of the mirror the morning of the summit, adjusting the emerald green suit she'd chosen carefully. Tailored. Elegant. Powerful. Caleb and Zara stood beside her, dressed in their best clothes. "Do we really have to go, Mom?" Caleb asked nervously. Nia smiled and knelt down to his level. "Yes, sweetheart. Because this is important. The world needs to see that we're not defined by what people think we are. We're defined by who we choose to become." Zara grinned. "I think you look like a superhero." Nia laughed and kissed her forehead. "Then let's go save the day." The summit was held in a massive convention center downtown. When Nia arrived, cameras exploded. Flashes everywhere. Reporters shouting questions. "Ms. Brooks, is it true you're Donovan Brooks' daughter? How does it feel to inherit billions? What are your plans for the estate?" Nia walked through it all with her head high, Caleb and Zara on either side of her. Calm. Poised. Unshakable. Headlines were already forming. Donovan Brooks' secret daughter emerges as billionaire heiress. The woman who inherited an empire. Backstage, Ethan Hale stood frozen in front of a monitor. He was supposed to speak in 20 minutes. But all he could do was stare at the screen. At Nia. At the woman he'd dismissed. The woman he'd told to handle it. The woman who was now the most powerful person in the room. His chest tightened. His hands went cold. This couldn't be real. But it was. When Nia stepped up to the podium, the room went silent. Thousands of people watching. Cameras broadcasting live across the world. She looked out at the sea of faces and felt no fear. Only clarity. "My name is Nia Brooks," she began, her voice steady and strong. "And I was raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I didn't know my father. I didn't grow up with wealth or privilege or connections. What I knew was resilience. What I knew was survival." She paused, letting the words settle. 7 years ago, I became a mother myself. Alone. Because the man I loved couldn't see past his empire to see me. The room was silent now. Ethan, watching from backstage, felt his throat close. He asked me to choose between my child and his comfort. And I chose my children. Both of them. Her voice didn't waver. "I worked 3 jobs. I went without sleep. I stretched every dollar until it screamed. And I did it because that's what love looks like. Not transactions. Not convenience. Sacrifice." A few people in the audience nodded. But I didn't need him to see me. My children taught me something more important. They taught me that love isn't about what you inherit. It's about what you build. The applause started small. Then grew. Today, I honor my father's legacy by building a future where no child grows up wondering if they're worthy of love. Where no mother has to choose between survival and dignity. The crowd rose to their feet. A standing ovation that shook the room. Nia stood at the podium, tears in her eyes, and let herself feel it. Not revenge. Just victory. Afterward, reporters cornered Ethan in the hallway. "Mr. Hale, is it true you have children with Nia Brooks?" Ethan's face went pale. No comment. Did you abandon her when she was pregnant? I said no comment. But the damage was already done. Social media erupted. His name trended for all the wrong reasons. The carefully controlled image he'd spent decades building crumbled in minutes. And Nia? She didn't engage. Didn't gloat. She simply moved forward. If you're loving this twist, smash that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. 3 weeks after the summit, Nia's assistant knocked on her office door. Her office. With floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Marble desk. Walls lined with her father's patents framed like art. Ms. Brooks, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Nia knew who it was before she asked. Send him in. Ethan walked through the door looking smaller than she remembered. Not physically, but diminished somehow. Like the confidence he'd worn like armor had finally been stripped away. He stood awkwardly near the door. Thank you for seeing me, he said quietly. Nia gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit. He sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan exhaled, running his hands over his face. I was wrong, he said. About everything. I was a coward. I was selfish. I thought I could control every part of my life, and when you told me you were pregnant, all I saw was a threat to that control. Nia listened, her expression unreadable. I want to be in their lives, Ethan continued. Caleb and Zara. I want to be their father. If you'll let me. Nia leaned back in her chair, studying him. This isn't about what you want anymore, Ethan. Her voice was calm but firm. This is about what's best for Caleb and Zara. They've lived 7 years without you. 7 years wondering why other kids have dads and they don't. Ethan flinched. They know their mother fought for them, Nia continued. They know I chose them when you didn't. So if you want to be their father, you're going to have to earn that title. You can't buy it. I know, Ethan said, his voice cracking slightly. I know I can't fix this with money. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to ask for a chance. Nia was silent for a moment. Then she spoke. Here are my terms. Supervised visits at first. You meet them in neutral places. Parks. Museums. Nowhere private until they're comfortable. Ethan nodded. Therapy. For all of us. You, me, and eventually the kids. We do this the right way. Agreed. No media. No interviews. No using them to repair your image. Of course. And no interference in my parenting. I've raised them for 7 years without your input. That doesn't change now. Ethan met her eyes. I understand. Nia studied him for a long moment, then nodded. We'll start next Saturday. 2 o'clock. Riverside Park. The first visit was quiet. Ethan arrived early, pacing near the playground, hands in his pockets. When Nia arrived with Caleb and Zara, his breath caught. They were so big, so different from the babies he'd imagined. Caleb held his mother's hand, watchful and protective. Zara stared at Ethan with open curiosity. Kids, Nia said gently. This is Ethan. Zara stepped forward. Bold as always. Are you really our dad? Ethan's throat tightened. He knelt down to her level, eyes shining. I want to be, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And for the first time in 7 years, something fragile and hopeful began to grow. 6 months later, Nia stood in Riverside Park watching Ethan push Zara on the swings. Caleb sat beside her on the bench, reading as usual. He's getting better, Caleb said quietly, not looking up from his book. Nia smiled. Yeah, he is. It hadn't been easy. There were awkward silences. Difficult conversations. Moments when the kids asked questions Nia didn't know how to answer. Why wasn't he there before? Did he not want us? Does he love us now? But slowly, carefully, they were building something. Not perfect, but real. Ethan had shown up. Every week. No excuses. No cancellations. He went to therapy. Listened more than he spoke. Learned that being a father wasn't about control or money. It was about showing up. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Nia had learned something too. She'd spent so many years believing she had to do everything alone. That asking for help was weakness. That she had to be both mother and father, provider and protector. But watching Ethan with the twins now, she realized something important. Letting him in didn't make her weaker. It made them all stronger. "Mom?" Zara called from the swings. "Watch this." She jumped off mid-swing, landing in the grass with a triumphant grin. Ethan looked panicked. Nia just laughed. "She does that all the time," she called. "You'll get used to it." Ethan shook his head, smiling despite himself. Later, as the sun began to set, Nia gathered the kids. "Say goodbye to your dad," she said. The words still felt strange, but less so every time. Caleb waved. Zara hugged Ethan's leg. "See you next week?" she asked. "Absolutely," Ethan promised. As they walked away, Nia glanced back. Ethan stood alone in the park, watching them go, and for the first time, he didn't look lost. He looked like he'd finally found his way home. Nia's voice, soft and reflective, echoed as the scene faded. "I learned that love isn't about what someone can give you. It's about who shows up when it's hard." Ethan thought he was protecting his empire. But empires crumble. Family endures. My father left me billions. But the real inheritance was knowing I was never alone. The money gave me choices. But my children gave me purpose. And Ethan? He's learning that being a father isn't a title you claim. It's a role you earn. Every single day. The final image showed Nia, Caleb, and Zara walking through the park, hand in hand. Ethan trailed a few steps behind, no longer leading. Learning to follow. Learning to listen. Learning that sometimes, the greatest power isn't control. It's surrender. And in that moment, under the fading light of the setting sun, for lives that had been broken began, slowly, carefully, to heal. Not into something perfect, but into something real. And that was enough. Thank you for watching this story. I know it was long. I know it had twists and turns that maybe you didn't see coming. But that's life, isn't it? Messy. Complicated. Beautiful in ways we don't always expect. Nia's story is about more than just wealth or revenge. It's about resilience. It's about knowing your worth even when the person you love can't see it. It's about choosing yourself and your children when the world tells you to shrink. And maybe, just maybe, it's about learning that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means moving forward with clarity instead of bitterness. So here's my question for you. What moment hit you the hardest? Was it when Ethan told Nia to handle it and she walked away? Was it the moment she discovered she was carrying twins and realized she'd be doing it alone? Was it when she stood on that stage at the Global Philanthropy Summit and reclaimed her power? Or was it that quiet moment in the park when Zara asked, "Are you really our dad?" and Ethan said, "I want to be"? Drop a comment below and tell me. I read every single one, and your thoughts mean the world to me. Because your value isn't defined by who stays. It's defined by who you become. By the choices you make when everything falls apart. By the strength you find when you think you have nothing left. Nia became a billionaire. But she was powerful long before the money came. Because real power isn't what you inherit. It's what you build. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you in the next one.